this debate tonight. I think it's very timely on the basis that the OECD report yesterday and our own budget coming through next week. It's about tax justice, inequality, and where that inequality is and where that can change in relation to multinationals paying just a fair share of tax and not trying to hide it under bushels right throughout the world. The first point I want to make as part of this debate, I think it has to be acknowledged. There has to be an acceptance in this debate that a so-called aggressive taxation policy by the multinational corporations is only possible because it is facilitated by states, governments and tax regimes. The second point, Ireland has played and is playing a role in such a facilitation. There is no disputing this. The official policy of tax competition to draw in FDI means an official policy of facilitation of an aggressive taxation policy. There's no equivocation on that. The third point, no one should be under any illusions as to what aggressive tax policies by multinational corporations actually means. It means evading tax. The best example of the role Ireland has played as a facilitator of this tax avoidance and evasion was the famous double Irish. This has now been phased out after an international hue and cry by worldwide charities, NGOs and public opinion. A famous Irish band can't go to concerts other than they see protest cards coming up about their own tax affairs and where they're going. There's huge public pressure has come on world opinion on this. The double Irish was used aggressively by huge multinationals, enabling them to pay little or no tax on huge profits. And I want to give some examples because you can't just say that in thin air and just leave it hanging. Apple has 3 companies registered in Ireland. One of these, Apple Operations International, they managed to channel $30 billion without making a single tax return. Not one single tax return. Google in 2011 made $12.4 billion in profit and paid just $22 million in tax. 12.4 billion profits, 22 million in tax. Google Ireland is owned by Google Ireland Holdings, which is in turn owned by Motorola Mobility International, which operates from a PO box in Bermuda. This nameplate company bills Google Ireland for the costs of, for example, administration, staff costs, sales and marketing, and for royalties. And after all this magic has been performed, the tax bill has been more or less disappeared. It's gone. And you couldn't make it up how they can do this. And let's take another leading American multinational based in Ireland. Intel Ireland is a branch of Intel International Corporation, which is based, where else, but the Cayman Islands. I have no doubt that these companies will use and abuse the proposed knowledge development box to continue to reduce tax on their profits. Minister Noonan has already made it clear that the proposed knowledge development box will be a key part of Ireland's continuing competitive advantage for drawing in foreign direct investment from foreign multinationals. It has already been hinted by sources in the Department of Finance that the corporation profit tax rate for the knowledge development box will be set at 5%. 5%. This is the same rate as set by those other European tax havens, the Netherlands and Luxembourg. It seems the government is intent on maintaining good company in this area. Now, today I read through the submission of the US Chamber of Commerce in Ireland to the consultation process which the Department of Finance has conducted with business interests, including those well-known tax evasion experts, KPMG. The US Chamber is certainly not hiding its light behind a bushel. In protecting the interests of US multinationals in Ireland, they want the knowledge development box to have the broadest possible definition of intellectual property. In fact, reading their submission, it seems that everything and anything, any sort of activity, should qualify under the rules of the box. For example, they're saying that intellectual property should not be limited to intellectual property that is just patented, but should include any intellectual property which can be legally protected should also qualify. And according to the US Chamber, intellectual property does not have to be actually legally protected, but simply can be. So they want an R&D which takes place outside Ireland, but a so-called strategic oversight in Ireland included. And also, in their view, a company is not required to legally own the intellectual property, but simply have the right to use it. It's just, what they're looking for is just incredible. It's a Pandora box for the multinationals. You can see from this the myriad ways which multinational corporations will try to exploit the knowledge development box. This avoidance and evasion of taxation is a huge contributing factor to global inequality and the persistence of poverty on a global scale. In particular, it affects poorer countries, denying them of the tax income which could be used to provide basic health services, to give every child the right to have a basic education. I think it's important maybe to put on the record of the Dáil that 13% of children in developing countries have never attended school, and the majority of them would be young girls. It also denies them the ability to deal with the 500 million children, 1 in every 3 who do not have access to sanitation, and it also denies them the ability to deal with the 400 million who do not have access to safe water. These two problems, which cause 4,000 children to die every day. Every day, 4,000 children die in relation to sanitation and safe water. This is what this criminal activity, it might be legal, but to my mind it's criminal, which this government is up to their neck in, means in reality, that's what it means in reality. People die in these countries. We see from the figures, the top wealthiest 10% in Ireland of the population own 42.3% of the wealth. In the meantime, we have the biggest housing crisis and humanitarian crisis of housing in the country for decades. We have a huge health crisis in our health service. We have 700 families, 1,500 children living in emergency accommodation. We have huge poverty, deprivation rates in the country. And the question is, why is that happening? Is the transfer of wealth going that direction while the bottom 50% are losing the means to live? And this is what this debate, I think, is all about. The final point I want to make is really important, and I'd like to really hear loud and clear the government's position on this, the country-by-country reporting. It will only make a difference if the information is put into the public domain. The belated actions by the OECD and the European Parliament and the EU Commission are happening solely because of public outrage. We need public reporting to keep up the pressure on governments, on the EU, on the OECD, and make multinationals aware that their activities in this area will no longer take place behind closed doors and can affect their brands and can affect their profits. It's not good enough to keep them exclusively in the revenue or in departments for national authorities. This public pressure is the only way, or the only thing that will have any effect in reining in this criminal activity. The Irish government should be leading the campaign for